This is the Art of Network Engineering podcast. In this podcast, we'll explore tools, technologies, and talented people. We aim to bring you information that will expand your skill sets and toolbox and share the stories of fellow network engineers. Welcome to the Art of Network Engineering. I am AJ Murray at No Blinky Blinky, and tonight I am flanked by the one, the only, the Tim Bertino. Tim, how you doing, Tim?
I am fantastic, AJ. I have been looking forward to this specific episode for a while now. I am ready to get going. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Also joining us this evening is Kevin. Kevin, how are you?
I'm doing fabulous. It's almost Friday. That's all I'm looking forward to right now. It's been a long week. It's almost Friday.
I was going to say, do you need it?
I think a lot of people out there need it. We'll cut right to the chase. Our guest this evening is Wendell Odom. You may have heard that name. He has written many books over the years. A lot of us have used to study for our certifications. Wendell, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your time this evening.
It's kind of you to ask. I've been looking forward to this. It's like hanging out, chatting with friends. So
Exactly.
Always could use more of that.
It was so great to meet you earlier this year at Cisco Live. I feel like I ran into you in 2019 during a Cisco Champions thing, but it was really great to talk to you again. And I'm super excited to dig deeper into, how you got into being an author and what your background in networking is. I don't want to jump right to it, but let's jump right to it. So, how did you get into networking? Never mind the author thing. Is your background in networking, or were you an author before and decided to tackle networking as a topic? How did this all start?
Yeah. So, wow, we're going way back. So, in college, I realized I needed money to pay for college.
So funny how that works.
I know, it's crazy, right? But, being a bit older than you fellas, I lived in a world for which you could pay for chunks of it working, whereas it's just unreasonable to try that today, right? So I started the co-op program at school where you'd work a quarter, school a quarter, and I landed at IBM in a data center and got to see all the different job roles and fell in love with networking. I wasn't even a computer science major, right? I just needed money.
Was that a happy accident, or were you like seeking IBM out?
No, I was seeking a place that paid. You got it. It was like, I can make it through halfway through sophomore year before I'm going to be working at Subway, that kind of thing. So once I got there, it's like, hey, I really like CS, I like networking. And by the time I graduated college, I want to work in some networking job. So by the time I fast forward up to signing up with Cisco Press for the first book, that was 13 years after college. So I had been working in networking for a good 13 years at that point. So
what was the intent in college? What was the degree, or what were you studying while you were in college? I was meandering, but I was in industrial engineering. But I wasn't like, I've got to do it. It was like, hey, you're good at math. You go to a engineering school. And now what? You discover what you want to do. And nothing really blossomed until I got to IBM. And the school is a public school. So the computers were not all that impressive. And CS was not a sought after major that much because, it was old equipment. You get to IBM, and of course they had Spanky knew everything. So it's like, this is what real life people do with computer jobs. I like this, as opposed to, hey, you can only use those 3 terminals to write APL because you don't have all the working characters on the keyboard, on the rest of it, that kind of stuff. That worked out pretty good. But yeah, industrial engineering, I think I would have enjoyed that had I landed there. But I think networking was the place for me. So that definitely was a happy chance.
What drew you to networking? What was the spark that really this is it for me?
Yeah. Well, I'm a rule follower. I like order.
And networking seems to be about a bunch of rules fitting together to make things work, right? So I don't like chaos, and so, of course, sorry, Kevin, that sounds like that was your week this week, right?
Yep,
yeah. And all the cool people at work were networkers. I mean, just saying. So the personal aspect of it was that. So, and the school, they had just started emphasizing networking. They were trying out a new senior level networking series my last year at school. I was kind of already leaning toward networking, but that helped a lot. It was great that 8 a.m. class, senior year, all these seniors in there. And the first day the professor comes in and says, this is a new class, slams a stack of papers down and says, it's not going to fit. 7:30 every time. So he upped it to a 7:30 start for all these seniors for the entire year. So,
wow. That's surprising.
He was, I soaked in every word, man. It was a great class. Now, I'm a morning guy. So I'll be nodding off in about 30 minutes. But yeah, it's that was a great class. But imagine back to our college days, right? That was not a time to want to have to wake up extra early for something, but it was well worth it. It was. I don't know. What about you guys? What clicked on it for you? Was there one particular thing about networking that was most attractive?
Well,
maybe that'll spark a memory for me.
I think it's common the concept you brought up about rule following, because when I went to school, I was a computer science major because I didn't know any better, and I shouldn't say it that way, but that's how I say it. And the immediate calculus, the immediate C++, I just had a hard time grasping those things. But when I sat in that first, happened to be Cisco Netacad was the program that we had at school. Immediately we started talking about things like the OSI model, and it breaks things down where you can start, bottom up or top down, and helps you kind of compartmentalize different parts of the networking stack. And I think that's what really helped me, because I'm the same way, Wendell. I thrive on structure. I guess I'm not the rule breaker. We talked about chaos. Maybe that's Kevin's issue. He's not a rule follower. I don't know, but that's really, networking gave me that structure in kind of that path. I keep going back to the OSI model, where you can start at layer one and work your way up. And that's what really clicked for me and brought me back.
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, it was just like the internet is something that I didn't think about much. It's a cool thing that connects everybody, but I didn't think the details going into it. And it wasn't until I discovered all the tiny, minuscule things that are happening and as fast as they are. And that was like, oh, wow, this is really cool.
Right. There's a lot to it.
Yeah. It took that eureka moment, I guess, for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For me, it was around the time I was going into college was the same time we were starting to get, decent internet in the area that I lived. And I was bringing a home network, or I was setting up a home network. Our home internet connection was coming in, and we're setting up wireless and pulling some cables around the house. And what's a subnet mask? What's that mean? And what, trying to figure out all this stuff. It was just very interesting. And then I get into college and find that there's a networking track. And one of the last classes I took in my associate's degree was like a general networking. And it's just like, oh man, this is fun. Like I took a programming class, and it was really annoying because I wrote like 200 lines of code just to get color to show up on the screen. And so networking, the teacher's like, telling us all this stuff, telling us about routing protocols. We got to make our own cables, which is like any networking nerd's like rite of passage. And it just really stuck. And it was one of those things like, if I'm going to pick a career, why not networking, right? Because we're always like, from here on out, man, we're a connected world. So it just felt like networking was one of those things that isn't going to go away. So I still love it. It's great.
Yeah, I've been doing it over 40 years, and I've loved all of it. So it was a good choice for me for sure.
Yeah. So what happened after IBM? You get to IBM, you get bitten by the network bug. You love networking. About how long were you there? What'd you do?
Yeah, it was a little over 8 years after college that I was there. So I had one job that was internal IT, so network engineer in a data center, and then one job that was kind of like the consulting SE role that Cisco has, go out and see IBM customers, talk to them about things. And fortunately, that was around the time that IBM started embracing TCP/IP. So part of my job was to go help IBM SNA customers. That was a protocol that existed before TCP/IP, for those of you that are a little bit younger out there listening.
Dan still deals with SNA, amazingly. One of our co-hosts. Yeah.
Goodness.
Their central application is on a mainframe, and it still uses SNA, and it's like the bane of his existence.
So people started considering also using TCP/IP and then not using SNA. And so I got to help with that. But IBM pretty much failed in their networking business to the point where they sold off the remaining pieces by 1997 or 98. So I split from IBM by 93 to get away from the sinking ship and started teaching Cisco classes. So we've all heard of Cisco Learning Partners. Well, I was around when it started. I was one of the very first Cisco certified instructors and went on the road teaching 30 weeks a year, doing that kind of thing. So by the time CCNA came out in 98, so internal IT job, then seeing IBM customers, and then about 4 or 5 years of teaching Cisco as a contractor, running around mostly the U.S., sometimes outside the country. And that was fun. I was still single. You run around, you don't have to worry about, wife and kids at home and family responsibilities. But when the CCNA got announced, then it's like, okay, maybe I'll get a chance to stay home a little bit.
So what made you make that jump from engineer to a teacher?
Well, that's an interesting question. So my first job was no teaching. So the first job after college, it was just, the old days version of what you folks may do today, right? Keep networks working, build new ones, design new ones, right? But in that next job, about a third to half of the job was building materials for workshops that were hands-on, and then bringing in SEs from the Southeast. I was in Atlanta, and we covered about 5 states. And it was always about teaching them new IBM networking products as they would come out. So new version of TCP/IP on the mainframe would come out, and we'd teach a workshop on that. So I spent a fair amount of time learning about course development and workshop development, lab development. Everybody thinks their way to do labs is best in every place I've ever been, right? So if you meet people that develop courseware in particular, just ask them about labs if you want to start a conversation. So I got experience there. And then, of course, when I was on the road teaching for Cisco Learning Partners, that I liked the learning part of that second IBM job. And I knew I could bridge from that to being self-employed by teaching. There were plenty of companies that would hire contractors to teach. So, and in the 90s, with the internet growing like it was, you couldn't help but turn around and get work in networking if you knew something about networking. So to be an independent contractor, you just had to say, hey, here I am. Here's a contract, go do work. It was, now things eventually slowed down, but yeah, it was just as fast as you could go, stuff needed to be done in those days. So it was easy to go out and teach. And then when I wasn't teaching, I'd do consulting gigs. I'll stop there for now.
Easy transition. And it was just like shooting fish in a barrel for jobs, right?
There you go. Definitely shooting fish there. So I got married in 1998 and I got engaged in January. And the very first week that I wanted to be working for pay and couldn't was like 2 weeks after we got engaged. But all the way through leaving IBM in 93 till 1998, I was busy working, getting paid every week that I didn't want to be on vacation. So it was a 5-year run and then of course we get engaged and my wife's like, or, future wife at the time, well, what are you doing this week? It was really unnerving to her to think that I could have a week off and not get paid. And how are we going to pay the bills? And is she marrying some bum, that kind of thing. So
Hey, you proved it wrong though. Look at you now.
Details. Yeah.
We got through it.
You got through it.
Yeah. Well, I'll just keep going. It's a kind of a fun story. So I'm on the bench for a week or two. She's like wondering about that. And then I got a contract that paid about twice what she made in a year, in a month. So then it kind of reversed that. She's like, all right, this is good. Take weeks off all the time, please.
Yeah. If this is what comes in between, you do you.
That's right. So that worked out. She had just grown up in a house where dad worked at the same company for 50 years and got a paycheck every week.
Yeah,
so
stability.
It took a little.
Yeah.
You got it.
So, Wendell, we've got a pretty good question from the chat here from Zatharian. Was there ever a point where you were teaching where you felt like you didn't know enough about a particular topic? Did you ever get that, imposter syndrome kind of feeling while you were teaching?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the rate. Twice a week? Twice a day? Yeah, no, and I don't mean to poke fun at the question. It's very easy to feel that. And yeah it comes up. I remember thinking this at some point many years into like, hey, I've taught this topic for about 12 years and I'm lecturing something. And in the middle of a sentence, I'm realizing I just had a new insight into how this really works. You just cannot understand it all.
Yeah.
You're going to keep learning or you're going to back up. But yeah, there's, you can't know it all. You just have to say, all right, I know enough. I tend to be very nervous about that. I think we all have the imposter syndrome thing going on to some extent, right? But from a teaching perspective, I think that was maybe the gist of it a little bit. I would be the type that would teach fewer classes because I would get over prepared before I would teach. And when I taught it, I knew as much as I could know from study.
Yeah.
And, there's other things you can't know without using things, right? So you have to have the pressure of getting student questions and being faced with things you've never thought of and going off and experimenting. But there were plenty of instructors who would teach 2 or 3 times as many different courses that I would, because they were a little more comfortable with I'll learn maybe a little less and I'll teach it. And you just answer and say, hey, I don't know the answer to that. I'll figure it out. But I always got very nervous about the whole being embarrassed in front of the room to say, I have no clue.
That kind of brings me to a question I had. It's a personal question. I don't know about the podcast. I don't care about that stuff. But so I learned CCNA from you. I read your book when I was first studying all that stuff. And you are a resource for a ton of people who are learning CCNA or networking in general. But as the CCNA changes and it evolves over time, where do you learn your stuff from? Like, how do you keep up with technology? Who's your resources?
Well, yeah. So there's probably 2 phases of that for me. There was when I was still attempting to be broadly read and know many things about networking. And in this latter stage, the bridge to retirement stage, if you will, I'm just focusing in on things that are in the CCNA space.
Gotcha.
All right. So say when I was writing about QoS and CCIE and things like that, those things would prepare me for topics that aren't even in CCNA, right? So, but it would, if you're writing a CCIE book and there's some overlap, that's going to have a natural effect of keeping you fresh on CCNA, and you're labbing a lot to write those kinds of books as well. But this day and age, it is get in the lab and try it again. And oh my goodness, Cisco documentation. For
better for worse.
It's written down somewhere, but I'm sure that's a very difficult thing to do well with the size of the company and the breadth of products.
I'm sure.
So I am not trying to cast the first stone, but there are many times when I wish there were more details in there that. And you
can be honest, Wendell. You're close to retirement. You can throw them under the bus. It's fine.
It's horrible. No, I'm just joking.
What are they going to do now? Fire you?
Yeah.
So I'll just go off on one here. So you got an Ethernet switch. You got ports. You configure speed and duplex. Does it turn off auto negotiation?
So if you go into the Cisco docs, over the years, there are places where it says it turns off auto negotiation. But you can't tell that from a trace, right? Because you need an oscilloscope to figure that out. And then I've learned that that's not always true on some switches, and it's not written down anywhere. I've invested probably 25 to 50 hours of searching for this next edition to find that answer. I just couldn't find it in the documentation. And what it turns out, from experimentation, that ports with PoE consistently leave auto negotiation on when you configure both, and ports without PoE consistently turn it off when you configure both. But
consistently inconsistent. Yep. Sounds about right.
Your mileage may vary.
Yes, but the documentation I could not find anywhere. Now, they did a very practical thing instead, which was auto negotiation works, use it. And they preached that through all the last 5 or 10 years worth of versions of docs.
Yeah.
I believe that. So they said, why do we need to document trivia? I'm thinking to myself, rather than, let's tell people not to be stupid rather than document stupid things. So, all right, I get that. But so
if we don't document trivia, then we can't create test questions around that.
You got that straight. So yeah, getting in the lab, trying stuff, and you can read docs, but part of it is you read other people's things. Is if somebody puts something out that's wrong, and then it gets propagated and propagated and propagated. It might even be Cisco, it might be me, right?
Might be a TikTok creator. Who knows?
Then, there you go. Could be a TikTok creator. Those videos are hard to edit, aren't they, Kevin?
They are. They are a lot of pain in the butts.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a little bit of the how do you keep up, but yeah, I read specifically. I take notes. I've got a app called Scrivener that I use this time around, where everything that I changed in the books that I researched, I've got all my notes on everything I came across with the links and what happened in lab and why I believe it to be true, so that if I then later look back and say, I think I got this wrong, I can look and see why I thought it. Because there have been many times over the years where somebody will say, but that's not right, Wendell. And it actually changed. iOS changed, for instance. And then a few times it's like, oh, I just blew it. I got it wrong. And, we're all human, right? So, so yeah, I'm much more methodical about it now than maybe I was in the beginning.
Which you were mentioning things changing. How do you go back when you have a revision or a new version of CCNA? Do you go back to your old material and verify and redo all that, or do you kind of just are able to use that as a base and move on from there?
Yeah, I have process. So imagine. So the books are in parts, you may recall, sets of chapters in a part related. So 3 editions is about as long as you can let a part go without a good scrub, sometimes 2 editions. But say, like I did a pretty good scrub and update on the access control list chapters for this upcoming edition. But next edition, say it's in 4 years, I won't have to scrub it. I won't recreate anything in the lab for those unless I have some external reason to think about it. But of course, eventually, if you just leave things there, something's going to change about iOS output. Like I scrubbed the IP version 6 chapters this time around. All that output is either regathered or I've confirmed that the format of the command output is the same and the commands are the same and they act the same to the point where I know that we're solid. So yeah, you do have to be. I mean, it's weird, but it's way different than writing a brand new book. It's a maintenance task. Even say 80% of the content is completely unchanged. There's still the maintenance part of that work. So,
do you prefer the maintenance part, or would you rather start like complete scratch?
Ooh, yeah,
yeah. I like it when I get a chance to improve something that I wrote earlier. So there's more than just the maintenance, more than just recreate the examples and fix the output and tweak a command parameter, that kind of thing. If it's simply, making sure there are no lies. That's a little bit more laborious. But like the access control list chapters, here's a bit of trivia. 1 ACL per direction per protocol is no longer true. So I had to update that. Now you can have 2 ACLs, 2 IP ACLs on an interface in the same direction, something called a common ACL, so that you could have.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
ACEs in
I need
one
to redo
set.
the CCNA. God damn.
There you go. Well, I have no clue if they'll even ask about it, but I'm looking at it. It's now in iOS. So do I not put it in the book? Or do I put it in the book in case they ask about it when some clever person comes along and says, oh, I heard this bit of trivia. Let's put an exam question in about this bit of trivia and that kind of thing. So, and I did a whole new chapter on ACLs for overhead protocols. Like how do you match and avoid matching incorrectly OSPF and DHCP and with the presence of NAT or the presence of DHCP relay agent. Those kind of overhead protocols. So that was kind of fun to update. But yeah, recreating the same old ACL example to update output, not very exciting.
So you mentioned like having to figure out what you need to put in the book. And how do you do that? How do you determine what's important for the CCNA book or what's not? Like, do you get the insider information about what's going to be on the test and you basically design the book around that? Or do you just get the blueprint that everyone else gets and you got to do as much?
Yeah, I was going to say, because the exam topics are just that. They're topics. It's not in depth of all the specifics that you need to learn. That's a good question, Kevin.
Yeah, it's really hard, just flat out. So it's an educated guess. It's an educated guess after doing this since the exam came out.
A lot of education. You got it.
Yeah, a lot of yeah.
Precisely. That nails it, right? But I get the blueprint early. I have a conduit to ask them questions about what they really mean by the words. But what I don't get is the exam database does have these kinds of topics exactly with these specific command parameters and not these. Yes, these concepts and not these. What I get is, well, here's what we intended to mean by this exam topic. But then there's reality, right? I'm sure you've never been to a Cisco exam where you thought, how in the world did they ask about this topic in this exam, right?
Never happens.
Yeah. Never happens.
Yes.
Not at all.
I always felt fully prepared to take a Cisco.
Yeah.
No curveballs, no weird questions at all.
Yeah. So just anecdotally, there was I felt so bad for Dave. Dave Huckabee wrote the Switch book, a couple of editions. He's a friend of mine, and I wrote the Route book, 1 edition, and Cisco put some weird, not technical topics about like PDIOO or something like that. The planning and deployment, et cetera, model. And they put those exam topics in the Route blueprint. So I tried to write something useful to it. It's the first time they had it in the exam. So I'm, just
guessing at this point.
Educated guessing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had all this great content and they asked all the questions in the Switch exam. So poor Dave is getting all these hate mails. Why didn't you cover blah 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 blah? And he's like, "What do you?" So anyway, so yeah, you can't really do anything about those. But things like how far do you go on the topics that are obviously in the exam? That's just hard to do. And so I even write to that in the intro a lot stronger these days and tell people, think of it like an SAT or ACT exam in the US, where it's college prep exam or college entrance exam. You're not going to know everything. So study what you know is on it, except that this is not about getting a 100. It's about getting a pass score. Get the pass score. Don't sweat it. But, if you look at the exam topics, we know where you should spend most of your time. Or if you just listen up to people that live here and get their input, you can figure out where to spend your time. Right. No OSPF, everybody, for instance.
Just all of it.
everything.
Yeah. I do want to pivot kind of into actual authoring of books. Wendell, were you a writer of any sort before you started writing technical content?
No. I had written a few 50, 100-page consulting papers, summarize the work that we did on a consulting gig, but it was not creative. I mean, it had to follow the rules of English language. But
so what has been your approach to writing a book? Because I just see that as just this massive undertaking. Daunting. I have sat down and written blogs before, and that these are like 1-2 page things, and it will take me a week because I'll write 10 words and go, I think I need to take a walk and come back, and then yes, that was really hard, that paragraph, so I'm going to take a week off. And then
writer's block is a real thing for a blogger.
Yeah, so it's like, how do you approach an undertaking like that? Do you see it as one big thing, or do you, like you mentioned, those books are broken down into parts? Do you take it a part at a time? What does that look like?
So yeah, you get started on your blog post. It's hard to write 2 pages. How do you write 1,400 that I'm looking over there at? Yeah. It's definitely an eat the elephant kind of thing. You just do the whole one bite at a time thing. But my mom paid me a backhanded compliment when I was young. She said to a friend, and she told me about this. She said, yeah, I told her, it's like, he's not the brightest guy, but, he was really persistent. And she did it with a smile on her face. She was about the nicest lady ever. But, and I thought, no, I'm not just, an average guy who's persistent. And it's like, I might just be an average guy who's persistent, and that's part of it, Tim. It's like, you just gotta keep plugging at it. And you say, hey, I'm gonna write something down this hour and the next day. So I think the persistence part of it is a big thing. But you got to get your head around the project. If you spend, and this is something I had already coached Jason on, because he asked me the same question, oddly enough, talking about the CCNA books, is how do you attack something that's big? If you are spending your energy thinking about the enormity of the task, be it a blog post that feels large to you, or a 2-volume set, it's going to win. So what can you think about? So we can imagine it down into parts and chapters and sections and topics. It's like, all right, well, right now I'm going to experiment with that weird new ACL thing that lets you put 2 ACLs on the interface, right? And you go play, and we all love playing in lab, right? So go figure it out, play with it, see what works, take a few notes on what might go in it. And hey, today I made progress, and you just keep chipping away at it. So
I would hone in on something, and I would spend weeks on one thing. Like I would just be on that for like a month and a half. So how long does it actually take you to write a book?
Well, I'm slower now, but the totally blank sheet for a new book where I don't need to research, it's about an hour a page, lock, stock, and barrel. Wow. So 500-page book, 500 hours. So that's write it, get the edit comments back, review those, get the copy edit comments, etc. But so little of my writing today is that, right? We talked about that a little bit earlier, right? So it's oddly enough, if you say, here's a chapter with 20 pages in the foundation topics where all the real content is, and I update significantly 2 pages and minor updates to 2 pages, but I still had to read the whole thing. That's not as time efficient. That actually takes more time. Removing even a paragraph or 2 with something meaningful in it is dangerous, because you don't know what else further down the road is relying on it. So, I mean, there are times when it's like, hey, I'm changing 20% of this chapter. I may just throw it out and reuse the figures and examples, but throw out the words and just write the whole thing again.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what's easier to do that than have to nitpick and what you're going to keep and what you're not, and how that affects everything. Yeah, makes total sense.
Yeah. So who knows? Maybe half a page an hour at that point. But it's it's a bit of a slog. I think the last one, oh my goodness, that's been a while.
I was going to say, you're not helping my case for wanting to write more blog posts.
Well, blog posts are, I don't think take as
you'd be surprised.
Planning you. So for the context, right?
Yeah.
You have a lot less of that, right?
Oh yeah.
What's your next topic in your blog?
I've been working so hard that I don't even have one.
All right.
No, I have not. I've shifted a little bit more to video lately, but yeah, so let's say I had a topic I wanted to write on, OSPF area types or bringing up neighbors. Let's say that's the next topic that I want to write about. What would your advice be to attack that?
I like an iterative approach. I know some people don't. I would literally write something and not worry about the wording of the sentence but I just want to capture ideas. And I learned this in a technical writing class in college, actually. A technique where you start with ideas and you try to write only the first sentence of the paragraph. So you write the first sentence, and what do we want to do as nerds, right? Well, detail, right? Because that's the fun, cool stuff.
Yep.
But there's a style of technical writing that says the first sentence ought to be the theme of the paragraph, and the subject ought to be the subject of the paragraph, and the subject should be the first phrase in the sentence. You don't need a novel. You don't need stylistic words. Make it, clarity over everything. So if somebody can read the first 4 words and know the topic of the paragraph, so now I've made my mind think, I'm writing a blog post with 8 paragraphs, and my topics of the paragraphs are these 8 short phrases. And then nerdy people, right? If I said, hey, compare and contrast a normal area to a stubby area, you can go off on that, right?
Yeah.
But now I've got the structure of, what those are. So I have found that effective. But also just get something down. I can edit something I've written a lot better than I can write something new. Does that resonate with any of you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So write something crappy and then make it better.
That makes a lot of sense.
Not use ChatGPT. Got it.
Can you use AIs to write?
Taking that a step further and talking about learning and knowledge retention, you mentioned that you had a book next year that was 1,400 pages. I think it's human nature. We get a book, we want to read it cover to cover and just go. What's kind of some of your advice there on, okay, you've written a book, it's out there in the public for people to learn and practice and study for a certification. What's your guidance on how people should use your books?
Yeah. So it's a 2-volume set for CCNA. In volume 1, before chapter 1, is a plan for how to use the books on purpose. And it answers that very question, Tim. So the idea is that, you certainly can't, if your strategy is to read them both cover to cover and then start studying, you're going to have forgotten almost everything, if not everything, right? So it's got to be a process. And I would even improve and change it now, even though the books just came out. I debated whether to put even more advice in that section or not. But you need, in terms of books, you read a small chunk, you do the review and study, you read a small chunk, do the review and study, but it's not necessarily even sequential. As modern learning science tells us that you will retain more if you delay between, say, your reading and your review. So the thing I would add even is read chapter 1, read chapter 2, do a bit of review on chapter 1, read chapter 3, do a little bit more review on chapter 1. So spaced learning is one of the big things in modern learning science that they say improves your retention over time. It's a little less comfortable, but it's more effective. But yeah, so I imagine from your days using the books, Tim, that you remember the end of chapter review. There's activities in the book that it suggests to you. There's end of part review activities.
Mm-hmm.
In my YouTube channel, when I sat down to say, all right, what do I want to accomplish there? It's not meant for entertainment. It's just more CCNA learning, right? But I decided, hey, if I make a video about a topic, I'm always going to have one more review something, whether it's another video that's a review exercise or points you to a blog post that's a review exercise. And I've really enjoyed coming up with video-based review exercises to go along with content videos. But yeah, you've got it. If you don't commit to the study part of the equation, I don't think you're going to be as successful at any big body of learning, whether it's IT or not.
Wendell, you mentioned your YouTube channel. That's relatively new. What was your idea there of why you want a YouTube channel? Is that to supplement your CCNA stuff on your books, or is it meant to replace it, or what?
Yeah, in fact, I may exercise that. I can ask you guys questions. I want to answer your question, but you tell me, when you're learning for something big, like you're studying for a certification exam or some big thing you're learning, not just finding out information about the CrowdStrike failure, right? But you're learning something big. Why do you pick video? Where do you find it effective? And why do you pick reading something big like a book? Can you think of one or two things that's appealing about video learning for big learning tasks? And what do you find appealing for books for big learning tasks, if anything?
Well, for me, I'm an auditory learner. I'm used to like lectures and audiobooks and podcasts and that kind of stuff where I'm ingesting a lot of the knowledge through my ears. And so I prefer videos just because of that. I can kind of focus in, and I don't know, when I read something, I'll read it like 3 to 4 times and lose where I am and just not keep track of what I'm doing. So I prefer videos. I've used CBT nuggets, and then I also supplement with your book to go kind of reinforce everything that I'm learning. But my primary source is always video, personally.
Cool. Either you other guys?
I agree with Kevin. I think that video to me seems almost more conversational. So that it's like Kevin mentioned, kind of that auditory, that classroom style. I think there's value in that. Where I really like text is within the last couple of years, how I have approached studying for certifications is using that spaced repetition approach that you brought up. We talk about the Anki flashcards a lot on here. In fact, we had an episode way back on spaced repetition and how people learn and that kind of thing. And what I like about text, especially digital, is I can copy that text and put it right into these flashcards that I can leverage and review on a daily basis. And the text just makes that a lot easier than, hearing it in a video and then having to type it down and that kind of thing. Yeah. So I think I think that combination approach is what really helps for me. What I like to do is to take different mediums. So like I would take your book, Wendell, I'd read the chapter. And then if I had a video resource of the entire CCNA portfolio, then I would basically take that chapter and watch the videos for that. And, so take one topic, use the different mediums I have at my disposal, and then build those flashcards as I go. So I'm constantly reviewing as I'm learning something new, because I'll tell you, I in the last couple of years, I got the CCNP, and pretty much the entire first year that I was studying for that, I was just going, read the chapter, watch the videos about it, read the next chapter, watch the videos. I was not doing that review that you were talking about. So other than getting value from doing labs as I went, I basically wasted a year of studying because I finally hit the end of that and I'm like, this isn't working. And that's when I developed that spaced repetition approach. And that's what really, I think, got me over that line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Wendell, for me, I like to introduce myself to a topic by video first, because usually they do a great job at like breaking it down, high level. When I want to go deeper, I'll look for, the textbooks, the technical papers and stuff like that, and just kind of immerse myself in it from there. And then if I've got to go back and review it, then it's flashcards, maybe watch the video again, and all the stuff at the end of the chapters that they want you to do to try to memorize key topics and terms and stuff.
Yeah. So all three of you gave different slants on it, and I've heard those things before. See how thick that is? That's one of them.
Yeah, that's one.
Did any of you or any of the other people listening probably say, I love reading thick technical books cover to cover, and I absorb doing that, right? Yeah. And it's definitely happened more as a cultural thing too. I've got a 23-year-old daughter recently out of undergrad, and she just laughs when it's like, so do you think anybody would read this book who's anywhere close to your age? And she's like, So what I'm trying to do with the YouTube channel is say, how do you take a book that's, in all fairness, I think pretty good at being a book for CCNA. I think we've got that down here. But how do you make it effective in the lens of what you three just said? For somebody that, honestly would learn everything with video, and they need some review tools, but they probably wouldn't read. Or I want to, learn first with a video and then read, or learn first with a video and use as reference a book. And that's the exploration I'm doing with the YouTube channel. And so I think that a YouTube channel with videos that are organized in the same outline as the book. So here's the premise. Each content video matches a major heading in a chapter in terms of scope, but I purposefully teach it a little differently than the writing style or the examples in the chapter. So it's like a second resource on the same concept. And if you are a lean video person, you can watch the video, and at the end of the video, I tell you, skip the section, look at these two topics in the section, make sure you look at these two key topics, or whatever the advice is about whether you can skip the section or dig in if your preference is video first. But we've got a huge amount of study and review tools packaged into the book in the same organization as the book. So if I manage to complete the task, then now somebody could buy the books, and if they want to use it solely for the review tools, like the monster big set of practice questions, which I got a little carried away on, honestly, but it's a large number, or the other review tools, or and just never read the text, or just use the key topics. Now, there's PDFs of all the key topics from the chapters pulled to the companion website, so you can review those. Or watch the video, read the chapter, or read the section of the chapter. So somewhere between that. So I think we can reach more learners with that combination than with just handing you a book. It just takes a little work to to get it all made.
Do you think people have changed how they're learned over the years since you first started doing this? Like these kind of the videos are the new medium of doing this, but you've been writing books forever. Do you think that is going to gradual change, or do you think this is just how it should have been from the beginning?
Well, it's definitely changed. Multimodal, I think somebody had tossed out that term, but certainly if you look at what, how kids are taught in school today, and I'm not opposed to those kinds of changes. We just want it to be effective. And certainly the more people learning a thing, the more you can invest in those different tools that may take a little more time to develop, right? There's just more money in the game to be able to do that. But I grew up in a world for which you read the textbook cover to cover, right? So partly it was like, all right, well, I've gotten pretty good at writing books, and I used to teach a lot, so I'm comfortable recording videos for the most part. But it's if I could do anything in that regard, I would maybe find some way to make written text more useful to those who embrace video. But I don't know if how many people that embrace video are going to start with this, right? So Kevin, maybe it's a different beast.
Kevin, how many TikToks would that be? Tell me that book size in TikToks.
Because I've looked at doing TikTok series for CCNA, and it's just so overwhelming the amount of stuff that it has to go over and how much detail do you go in and all that stuff. I can't imagine writing the book, let alone having to make these little videos that you do that are like it blows my mind that you can even do this. To be honest, I'm very impressed by what you've been putting out. That's all I'm saying.
Well, thanks. It's not quick, but it's funny on that. I mean, I'd be curious to get your input. So we've had this conversation around the family. It's like, all right, so could I make a video course comprehensive to CCNA that was 1 minute portrait oriented videos that are popular today?
Yeah,
I mean, how many?
It's hard to get that much information in a little minute video, and like you have to do bite size, but then are you going into enough detail? Are you making entertaining? There's a whole balance there of, is it entertaining and is it actually useful information?
And can video number 10 rely on people having watched 1 through 9?
Yeah,
because if you can't rely on that, you'll never get there.
Yeah,
right?
I think a YouTube platform like that, you could do a little better because I have playlists and stuff. But like if you're doing TikTok or anything that's just being force fed, like Instagram Reels and all that stuff, then I don't think it works well.
No chance.
Yeah. But would a 2,400 1 minute video playlist on YouTube
10,000 videos in this playlist.
Hey, Wendell, you never know until you try.
There you go. Well, I'll make 10,000 videos and I'll let you know how
let you know how it works. Yeah.
Well, Wendell, I don't think we covered this. How did you go from teaching to writing? And then as a follow-up to that, what was the first book?
Yeah. So teaching to writing. So I'd been doing this gig, teaching on the road 30 weeks a year, developing some courses. So in 98, in April, Cisco announced CCNA. I was getting married in June. I wanted to stay home more. They had a placard the size of a business card that said, "Want to write for us?" At the Cisco Press booth at Cisco Live. They had 5 books out, and it had a placard that said, "Want to write for us? Call John." John's phone number.
Wow.
Write John's phone number down. John was in the middle of a job change, so I called John every week for like 2 months. He didn't return my calls. So his replacement, sorry, it wasn't John, it was Jim that left. John took his place. And then after a couple of conversations, they said, sure, we'd love for you to write a book for us. Which one do you want to write? And I said, so it was basically what grew up to be Route Switch or CCNA. And I said, which one will sell more? And so they said the one that's the prerequisite to the other two, CCNA. And I said, all right, cool. I'll write that. So that was the motivation. So it kept me from doing the road warrior, teach on the road for the first half a year of marriage, which worked out. And they promised up front, about the whole writing and the difficulty thing. It's like, all right, so sign up to write a 500-page book when you've written 50-page consulting reports, half of which are, tables and things like that to tell them things like IP addressing plans and the like. And they said, if we need the nerd, we've got people that can write English. So said, we will fix every sentence as need be, but we can't write about the technology. So they said, just get the tech into the Word doc and we'll take care of it. And I'd like to think that it wasn't all that bad starting out, but I definitely have grown into it. It was, it took some practice to get better and better at it.
But when you wrote that first book, did you get the vibe like I can see myself doing this for a long time, or is this like a happy accident?
Yeah, it was probably 2 editions in before, and those were pretty quick. They revved CCNA. Let's see, it came out in 98. They revved it again in 99. They revved it again in 2001. So by the 2001 edition, it's like, I could probably do that and then add a couple other books in with it and make a business out of that. A business that paid me, not a business where I had a bunch of employees running around. Books just don't pay well enough to do that kind of thing.
Sure.
But certainly to keep me and my family fed, it seemed reasonable at that point. So that's when I started thinking, all right, well, what other books do you add in? So talked to the publisher. They were happy with me. They're happy to send projects my way. So that's when we added in things like I did a couple of editions of a QoS book, and then we decided I'd do the CCIE route switch written, did 3 editions of that. That was a beast. So that was, talk about the whole imposter syndrome. Writing a book where all of your customers are going for their CCIE. Yeah, that was pretty scary, but it worked out.
How many total books have you written over the years?
All right, so I have to do this math occasionally. So it's 10 or 11 separate books, 29 editions, 3 video products, and I helped out with a software product. So
wow.
So 29. If I count a new edition of a book as a book because of the work involved.
Yeah, the work involved.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, sure.
But it's not in terms of what the public sees so much. So, but yeah, it's a lot. I kind of lose track, but since the publisher said, "Hey, when you're teaching, keep your books up there in the backdrop," so that's the most recent CCNA books over there, the less recent over here, everything else there, and stuff I impacted by passing off material on those. So yeah, it's a lot, but yeah, it's been fun to do. It's funny. I was joking with my publisher today. We had a meeting, and it's like, so what are you doing now? The CCNA books are out. You don't have any work left to do for us for this edition. What are you spending your time on? And I'm like, well, I've been thinking about another book. And he's like, no, you're trying to get rid of this one. Why do you want to write some other new books? So we'll see about that. But I probably won't do another whole new one. I might get Kevin's advice. Maybe Kevin will team up and do.
There you go.
10,000 1-minute CCNA videos from Kevin and Wendell.
I love it.
We do a collab. I love it.
Will the YouTube channel continue after retire or after you enter retirement? Is that going to be like maybe the little side fun project?
Oh yeah. So this is not a plan for Wendell to retire fully. This is a plan for Wendell to hand off the grandkid to Jason, so to speak.
Okay, all right.
So I'll probably keep my fingers in something somewhere. So nice. I really want to try out the YouTube channel to see if I can I serve the people I've been helping with CCNA for 20 some odd years better with one last big push in this YouTube channel and figure out how to do that well, not just, hey, what we need is another video on ARP, right? We may not need that, but we might need something that's systematic, that works well with the books, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm going to try to figure that out.
Nice.
But yeah, I would, I'm not able to talk publicly about the how and when and wherefore, but the goal is for that to be long lived. Like I chose a network upskill name for the channel. So it's not tied to any other, like Search Skills is the name of my company that, my paychecks come from, and my blog site is searchskills.com. But I chose another name for the YouTube channel in part so that it would be easily set aside and funded and used by others once I decide to be done with it.
Now, Wendell, when did you get your CCIE? Because you were talking about you had to write the CCIE book and you were, feeling some imposter syndrome and that kind of stuff. Did you have your CCIE way before that and was kind of like doing this? Or, did you have to get your CCIE while you were writing the book? On the fly.
Goodness. That would have been horrible. No, I got it in 95, October or something. It's on the wall. So it might be on one of those little doodads on the shelf. October 24th, I think. So my number is 1624, which is, by
low.
Today's standard, a
pretty
low number. And it's, I guess, enterprise now, right? Is route switch. They didn't have other names for them back then. It was only route switch back then. And then I probably wrote the first CCIE route switch cert guide. I did what was effectively the second edition, although they didn't call it that. Somebody else did the first one. It was probably 2003 or 4. It was the year after Katrina hit New Orleans, because we signed up the deal sitting at the convention. Cisco Live was in New Orleans the year before the hurricane hit down there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So anyway, so I was already a CCIE. I had taught CCIE boot camps for a learning partner. I lived it every day, and it was still a very scary subject to write about.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. CCNA scrutiny is most people are learning it and don't know anything about networking. So more of the questions are they're confused about something and you can help them. And then you get to CCIE and people are, they find a problem in the book and they may not bother to spend their time telling you because they're moving on. They've got other stuff to do and say, well, I know that that's not right. I know it's really this. So I don't get the feedback quite as much if I happen to have something wrong. But then when you do get the feedback, you're talking to, the lead person at whatever company you're thinking of. That's the person giving you the feedback, right? So those were interesting ones. It was interesting to go to Cisco Live in those years. We'll just put it that way, right? Hey, Wendell, you got a minute?
Was the feedback personal attacks? Because I get that a lot on the internet. Weird thing. Yeah, I can imagine being books a little easier.
Yeah, it's not quite so personal. It's like, no, you mean the book is wrong, not that I'm ugly and my mom addresses me funny.
Exactly,
we don't get much of that. It's interesting though. You talk about putting yourself out there on your videos, right? I mean, you're doing more than teaching. You're being entertaining while doing that to get people engaged. And of course, haters going to hate, right? So yeah.
I kind of tone it out now. I just had a video recently that's over 1 million views now. And, once you break a certain point, you start breaking into the general public, not just the tech nerds. And that's when the people really let loose. The general public have no idea what I'm talking about or anything like that. Yeah. And they just really, they let you have it.
They for the sake of hating.
I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'm going to tell you why you're wrong.
Exactly. Exactly. Or just personal attacks, like just making fun of me, like the way I look, just just random stuff. The internet's funny.
It really is. You're ugly and your mom addresses you funny.
Honestly, it really is. It really is.
Oh, I hate that for you, Kevin.
Okay.
I hope that reduces, dude. That's just
you can't be on the internet without
tune it out.
Yeah, it's part of the growing process too, of putting yourself out there. You've got to have some confidence in yourself and who you are and what you're saying, and just people are going to be people no matter what.
Yeah. Well, great attitude. I don't know that I'd want to go there. I'm gonna limit the number of people that can watch my YouTube videos. I don't want to
start turning comments off and
got to sign a waiver first before you can see the video.
Yeah.
But, Wendell, I've got one more question that I kind of want to put you on the spot for. I've been seeing, and we've kind of had discussions internally about this too. I've been seeing more and more things about how there's this thought out there that potentially network engineering could at some point go away, or it's not going to be as big of a focus as it has been in the past and I think is right now. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think at some point we will see, a downturn in people that are trying to learn network fundamentals and get the CCNA, or do you think it's got many strong years ahead?
Well, I can give my opinion, but it is not based on researching data from say the U.S. Department of Labor, that kind of thing. So I can only give you, the sense that I get of it. I just don't live in that part of the world of like sometimes people ask me to talk about, come on some show and talk about the job market. And I'm like, well, I don't live there. I'm not part of that. I'm helping people learn skills for that, but not to get there. So the best I can tell, the number of people needed versus the number of jobs available, there's still a shortage. That's what I hear from different articles that quote the Department of Labor. Anecdotally, though, there's compression in the market. There's always going to be ups and downs in the market. I don't think we're anywhere close currently to a world for which you can turn around and get 2 offers in a month if you want to start job shopping. So there are times when that's been true, but I'm just, and thinking about what we're going to do tonight for this recording, I was thinking back to the early days of my career. I got out of college in 1985. It was a great job market. I almost got a master's degree. I would have gotten out in 87. Horrible job market. So, part of it's the ebb and flow, but I don't think the long-term outlook is poor, but we are definitely in the, what's the analogy? I can't remember who to give credit to, but it's like one generation's Nobel laureate is the next generation's engineer, is the next generation's technician. We're definitely in the technician stage. And eventually the jobs would go away, but it's maybe literally, maybe it's a 20-year thing. Maybe it's a 40-year thing, but we're all going to get replaced by AIs anyway, right?
Yeah. No, that's a fair answer.
So where did all of you land on what's the long-term networker outlook?
So I don't think network engineering in and of itself is going to go away. What I see happening is the kind of continued push toward abstraction and trying to take as much of the intricate details of configuration and building networks away. I mean, we're seeing that. I think a good parallel to that is the public cloud model. Is we want to be able to provide people an end user interface that they can go in and easily point click, pick what they want. I think at some point that's where the industry is trying to take networking, but networking's still there, and you're still going to need people who understand and are able to troubleshoot and fix things when they're broken. That's kind of my stance on it.
Yeah, I think we'll eventually get there, Tim, but I think before we get there, it'll probably be network as a service, and you're going to need a lot of network engineers to operate that model. We're not going away anytime soon.
Yeah.
I don't think.
I'm curious to see how like network as a service and all these things go in that, like we just saw with CrowdStrike, how it caused a global outage because of one little thing. And I could see network as a service happening and, the provider or whatever goes down and we have no one to fix it. We have no one on premise. We have no idea what's going on. We're at the vendor's mercy. So as we move towards the same thing with the cloud, we're moving off premise and going to cloud. I'm curious to see how this progresses and if there's like a boomerang back of, getting all this power away from our individuals who are at the company and seeing if, I don't know. That's my hope, I guess. I like control. I like control, and I like having people on premise. I don't like the cloud. I'm sorry, Cable's the cloud guys. I mean, I love you guys, but like I want control of everything. I don't like having someone else's computer. I don't like it as a service, anything like that. So I know we're moving that way. So, but my hope is people will see the light eventually and start peeling it back and coming back into control. But who knows if that's going to happen or not? But that's my hope.
I love it. Let's just do away with cloud completely by 2026.
I'm
Kevin's happy.
That's awesome.
But I'm hopeful for the future. But it's a question that comes up related to that sometimes. If you're 20 which technology area, and you want to be in computers, what technology area do you want to get into? And then you see, occasional articles, what are the best paying entry level things to go for, and cloud's in it now, and you seldom see networking mentioned. So are those accurate, or are those just trying to get clicks to sell ads or not? But I think people that wrote the articles are probably genuinely interested in it. But yeah, it's not like, as I mentioned, in the 90s, it's like network, internet growing at 14% per month. You're going to have some jobs, right? So.
Well, Wendell, we have been at this for over an hour. I cannot believe how quickly this has flown by. I want to give you an opportunity to talk about anything you're working on currently and where people can find you at all your different places.
Oh, sure. So you can find me at Linktree/Wendello, Wendell O. So,
I love that.
Or Wendello if you prefer. And that'll link to everything in my digital life. And the big thing for me these days is continuing on with the YouTube channel, generating content. We've got, I guess for the live listeners, you're hearing this in time to know that we've got content coming out in August related to the exam release. And for those of you that see it recorded, the goal is to get videos related to one book part out every month until I've got some out for all of the parts of both volumes. So that's the publishing plan there. So yeah, and I do teach online occasionally at the O'Reilly platform. It used to be called Safari. So if you want to learn CCNA level things from Wendell, you can pay them money and come to my class. It doesn't pay me money directly. I get paid another way, but it's a paid service. But love to see you there. They do have short free trials occasionally, but it's definitely a give them your credit card short free trial. So if you go that route, make sure you note in your calendar when to cancel your trial if you really don't want the trial.
Awesome. We'll have all those links in the show notes so you can easily find them there. Wendell, before we sign off, is there anything that we should have asked you, or is there anything you want to ask us?
Well, you guys want to stay up another hour? But yes, I won't keep us going too long. I know you were leading us to the close with that, AJ. So
before we sign off, I also want to say, just Wendell, I met you the first time Cisco Live, and as someone who is younger than these guys are old as crap. But
I'm pretty sure we're the same age. Man.
No, man, I'm way younger. What are you talking about? You
Tip
were
your
my
head
first...
forward, I dare you.
No, we don't talk about my bald spot. But you were, I read your book. That's how I first got into my CCNA studying and stuff like that. And, I always have that fear, don't meet your heroes kind of thing. But I met you for the first time a couple months ago at Cisco Live, and you are genuinely one of the nicest guys in the world. And I am so glad that we got to meet. You are amazing. And I just wanted to, before we sign off, and I don't see you for a while, I just want to say that I really appreciate you, man. You're an awesome guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank you. It's very, very sweet of you to say and to feel. And, Cisco Live was pretty overwhelming for me this year. That's where we met Kevin. And it was, there were a lot of people saying nice things to me. And, it's great to hear, but I just, by Wednesday or so, I think my heart was full, and it just hit me. It was a lot. I was very thankful for it, but it's like, man, all these people, I need to get back to the basement and hide out for a while. But thank you for that, Kevin.
Oh, mean it.
Awesome. Wendell, thank you so much for your time. This has been such a fun conversation. Again, we'll have all the links in the show notes to everything that Wendell mentioned earlier. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on another episode of the Art of Network Engineering podcast. Hey everyone, this is AJ. If you like what you heard today, then make sure you subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcatcher. Smash that bell icon to get notified of all of our future episodes. Also, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We are at Art of Net Eng. That's Art of Neteng. You can also find us on the web at artofnetworkengineering.com, where we post all of our show notes. You can read blog articles from the co-hosts and guests, and also a lot more news and info from the networking world. Thanks for listening.